Hi guys, Chris here from CNCMachinePlans.com. It's been a little while since I posted a video. I think it's reaching about 2.5 months now, but a lot has happened in that time. I've actually moved from out west, so Inverell, to the coast now in Port Macquarie, so that's where I'll be based from now. But that's sort of the reason why things have been held up as far as redoing the mill, building it and that sort of thing. But I'm back on track now, so the things that I've got to do is finish the electronics here, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, and I've got to build the enclosure for the mill because I just don't want chips flying all over this garage, and that's really about it. Order a little bit of tooling, that sort of thing. I am going to use the Tormac tooling system on this, so I'll have to order a fair bit of that. Probably what I will end up doing is using the eBay version. I think for about $100 you can get the entire system, well, the system, the ER20 system that holds the collets and that sort of thing, so that's what I'll be using. As far as what I'll order from Tormac, then I'll probably just order their super fly cutter, boring bar, just a couple of things that aren't available through eBay, well, that I haven't come across yet. So if they are there, let me know, and I'll probably get them from there. But talking about enclosures and that sort of thing, when I first started building CNC machines quite a number of years ago, I'm actually embarrassed to say that I never used an enclosure. One of the things I did with my very first machine that I built, in hindsight, was pretty dumb. I mounted all the electronics to a sheet of MDF. So, anything comes off, sort of major fire hazard there, but it's been okay because I don't own the machine anymore, but I hope someone else picks it up, so someone with more sense than me at that point in time. But since then, I have been buying enclosures, so for the last couple of machines I have. But these enclosures are expensive, and the enclosure was sort of the last thing I thought about. When buying all my electronics, I spent, well, on the last machine that I built before doing the mill conversion, I spent $1,500, $2,000, and the last thing I wanted to do was spend another $250 on an enclosure. So I was looking everywhere. I looked in China, just on AliExpress, Alibaba, that sort of thing, but yes, the cases were cheaper, but the shipping was killing me. And so I thought, well, where do all these cases come from? They'll probably all come out of China anyway, which they do. Well, if there's a local manufacturer, I haven't come across it yet. So I started ringing around all these guys that brought them in and reselling them, and yeah, they were $250, $300. In this case that I've got up here is a 600mm by 600mm, which I think's in inches is about 24 inches by 24 inches, and top to bottom is 200mm, so that's about 8 inches. And so I started ringing around these guys and asking them if they had any damaged stock, because obviously bringing them in, they would have stock that didn't arrive safely. So I come across one fella that's been really good to me. I bought a couple of cases off him, and where the cases are normally $250, $220 maybe, I ring him up and I said, have you got any damaged stock in? He goes out the back and has a look, and the worst one that he had was this one, and I'll see if I can bring this over a little bit. You probably can't see it there, but just to give you an idea, between my fingers there, that's the extent of the damage. So there's a chip off the powder coating, and it's just on the very corner. So that was it. He gave it to me for 80 bucks, plus a little bit of delivery, which is about $15, $20. So 100 bucks. Got this case delivered. It has a floating plate in it that I could mount all the electronics to, and I thought it was a bargain. So, you know, that's the second one I've got for around 100 bucks. So if you're building a machine and you don't particularly care about the aesthetics of it too much, ring around and ask if they've got damaged stock. And like I said, this is the second one I've bought that has been damaged. The other one had a little scratch actually on this side, and it was ever so fine that I just got my fingernail and just scraped it and rubbed it back a little bit. You can't even see it, it's just gone. So paid a little bit extra for that one. I paid 110 delivered. So, you know, like I said, ring around if you don't want to spend much, see if they've got damaged stock. And you know, I think I've got lucky those couple of times where those cases have been, you know, hardly anything to even worry about. So I'm pretty stoked with that. So that's my experience with buying cases and sort of what I recommend for that. I've got, in the meantime, I've been doing some other things, because I had a smooth stepper running the CNC router, but I didn't want to buy another smooth stepper to run the mill, because these smooth steppers here in Australia are about $250 each. By the time you sort of buy a little power supply to run it and that sort of thing. And so, you know, I didn't want to spend 500 bucks in two smooth steppers, so I pulled the other electronics apart, or didn't really pull it apart, just unbolted the smooth stepper out of it, which you can see, and I've got it in its own little enclosure. I haven't quite finished this yet. I've got the back power mounted. There's a little fuse in that with on and off switch. So I've done all the wiring. It's got its own little power supply, smooth stepper, and everything at the front there. I'm certainly looking forward to having the mill running. I wish I still had my CNC router that I just previously built. Well, I've still got it, but it's just in storage while I'm in transition at the moment. So the CNC router or the mill would have been handy to cut a nicer slot, but I just used a Dremel for one of those, and you know, it comes up close enough for me at the moment. What I'll end up doing is there's a cover that goes over this, which is that there, so that just drops over. So what I'm going to do is on the side here, I'll plug in all my parallel ports, and I'm going to run them to, they'll be sitting this way, 1, 2, 3. I have 3 parallel ports sitting here. I don't know whether I'll have them vertical or horizontal yet, so we'll see how that goes. I'm waiting for those to turn up, just the little ribbon cables with the TM25v connectors on them. So, you know, I'll draw those up and stick them on and see how I go. So that sort of leads me to the next thing I do. When assembling electronics, in the past I've sort of tried to draw it and measure it and, you know, that sort of thing, and sometimes it can be a real pain because you end up drilling a hole and it's for finding the exact location. It can be a rather tedious job and quite frustrating when you don't get the holes lined up. Then you have to make one that little bit bigger, and then you have to get washers. And so one of the things I've done, which I should have done from the very beginning, but not being very mechanical savvy in the first place when I started 8 years ago, I didn't really know the tips and tricks and that sort of thing. But you know, the more machines I've built and the more electronics I've done, then things have become easier and easier to do. So one of the things I do now which makes assembly real easy, is I print off. So this here I've got breakout board. So one of the things I do is get out my CAD software, draw it up. You can find these measurements everywhere. So that's for a power supply, and I draw it up. And once I've drawn it up, then on this plate, let's get some sticky tape, stick them all down, center punch all the holes, drill them, and it's really that easy. As far as drivers go and that sort of thing, then drivers have that there. I've got them all pre-programmed already, so that's for the Z-axis. It's using an EMA 34 motor. But rather than, I could drill holes for this and line them up and that sort of thing, but one of the things I generally do anyway is I sit them straight down and I get the self-tapping sheet metal screws and I just screw them straight down, straight in. And that actually worked out really well anyway, because if I take them out, I can always drill out that existing hole if I need to and then put screws and bolts in, doing it that way. So that's how I mount the electronics in the case. You know, it doesn't have to be difficult, but I'd say the hardest part in doing all the electronics is working out how you're going to set everything out, work out your layout, how you're going to mount your power supplies, your drivers, breakout board, that sort of thing. Your bottom panel here, this unscrews, which is really good because then I can mount all my plugs and that sort of thing in the bottom here, so that makes it really good because I can unbolt that, mount all the plugs, solder all the wire on them, put the plate back on, then open up the lid and put everything back in it. So this is probably going to be a couple of part series where I go through and just talk about beginning to end. The next thing I'm going to do is stick all these down, and then I'll come back with a layout, sort of what I've done, and showing you the next step of that. So this will be the first part. Yeah, when I come back, we'll talk about it some more.